I'm an accountant. I spend my days finding the one number in a stack of 1,000 that doesn't belong there, the missing penny, the transposed digit, the entry somebody hoped nobody would ever check. So when my mother decided that $145,000 of mine belonged to my sister, she picked the single worst person in the state of Ohio to try that on. My name is Asha Mayers. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of the week my own family tried to prove, in writing, that I'd lost my mind, and the one piece of paper that proved they were the ones lying. It was a Tuesday in June. I was at my desk reconciling a client's payroll when my mother's name lit up my phone, her voice coming through bright as a parade float. "We added Daphne to the account, sweetheart," she said, "so she can finally get her start." I watched the cursor blink on my screen for a second before I answered. "Funny," I said. "I cashed it all out. There's $8.50 left. Here's what none of them knew yet. The money was never the worst part of what my mother did that spring. The worst part was one sheet of paper, printed on real medical letterhead, carrying a doctor's signature, from a doctor who never wrote a word of it. What my family did with that piece of paper put my own mother across a table from a fraud investigator. And it put me in front of a choice I hope you never have to make. Welcome to calm drama stories, where the secrets families keep finally come up for air, and the quiet ones finally get to talk. If a story like this hits close to home, drop a comment and hit subscribe, because you are going to want to see exactly how this one ends. To make sense of that phone call, I need to take you back to March, 3 months earlier, before any of this had a name. I live by myself in a small apartment in German Village, on the south side of Columbus, with a gray cat named Ledger and a spice rack alphabetized within an inch of its life. I do taxes for a living. I find the missing penny. It's not a glamorous job, but it bought me a quiet life, and I earned every square foot of it. A scholarship, night shifts at a diner, an entry-level cubicle, 12 years of simply showing up when I said I would. In my family, though, my job title was never accountant. It was the responsible one. And that title came with duties nobody ever bothered to write down. I did my parents' taxes every spring, free of charge, at their kitchen table in Grove City, 20 minutes from my place. When my sister needed a co-signer for her car loan last year, guess whose name went on the line? When Daphne's gym membership started quietly billing my card. A temporary thing, she promised. Temporary lasted 14 months. I paid, I fixed. I smoothed things over, and I told myself that was love, or at least the closest version of it my family knew how to hand me. Here's the thing about being the responsible one. Nobody thanks you for it, because responsibility gets treated like weather. Nobody thanks the sky for raining. My mother called me her rock, and it took me 34 years to notice that rocks are things people stand on. That March, I was 34, single, steady, the daughter with a spreadsheet where her heart should apparently be. I thought my place in this family was solid ground. I had no idea there were two kinds of children in it, and I was about to find out, the hard way, exactly which kind gets protected. That account didn't start with me. It started with my grandmother. Nana June was my mother's mother, a woman who ironed her dish towels and paid for everything in cash her entire life, and the one person in this family who ever really looked at me and saw something worth paying attention to. In 2000, when I was 8, my grandfather's small life insurance policy paid out, and Nana took $5,000 of it and opened an investment account in my name, a custodial account, the kind a parent manages until the child is old enough to manage it herself. My mother was named custodian, since Nana didn't trust any paperwork she couldn't iron flat. I still remember Nana's hand on my shoulder, gripping it like a clothespin. "This is for the one who counts pennies," she told me. "One day they'll all be counting on you, honey. Just make sure you still have some left for yourself." When I turned 21 in 2013, the account transferred into my name alone, the way the law requires. By then it had grown to around $11,000. I treated it like a garden. $500 a month at first, $800 once I got promoted, 12 years of automatic transfers into boring index funds, straight through every market panic that came along. By this spring, it sat at just over $145,000. My retirement. My proof that a diner girl with a scholarship could build something that was actually hers. But in my mother's mouth, that account never once had my name on it. She called it the family fund light, like a joke, every single time she said it. Years ago, I corrected her once. "It's my retirement account, Mom," I said. And she laughed the way you laugh at a child who said something adorable and wrong. "Family doesn't keep score," she told me. At the time, I thought it was a sweet little saying. I hadn't done the math on it yet. Now let me tell you about my sister. Daphne is 29, 5 years younger than me, and for a full decade she has been about to find her path. First, it was the candle studio. My parents covered the lease until it folded after 8 months. Then a life coaching certification, $4,000, paid for out of my mother's savings, which produced exactly one client, and that client was our aunt. Then came resin art. Then a podcast that never once aired an episode. Every one of these chapters started at a family dinner, with Daphne glowing, and ended with a quiet transfer of somebody else's money. She lives in our parents' basement in Grove City, rent-free, in a bedroom my dad drywalled for her 30 days before she would have been evicted. I want to be fair here because fair is my job. Daphne isn't cruel. She's what happens when nobody ever lets a person hit the ground. She never actually learned where the ground is. My mother built her a world with no floor and no bill, and my sister simply decorated it. That spring, the new dream was a wellness studio, Daphne Wellness. There was already a logo, sage green, a little sprig of eucalyptus curling over the D. She talked about manifesting and grand openings. Nobody mentioned money once, which in my family is exactly how you know money is the entire subject. Then, on a Wednesday in March, my mother texted me. Sunday dinner, 6:00, family business to discuss. I sat in my parked car and read that text 3 times, and I felt my stomach do the thing it does during an audit, right before the numbers go sideways. Because in my family, the phrase family business had only ever meant one thing. My wallet. Sunday, 6 o'clock, the good tablecloth was out, and that alone told me the ask would be big. My mother deploys linen the way generals deploy artillery. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, my dad Walt already studying his plate like it owed him an apology, Daphne practically vibrating in her chair. My mother, Lorraine, waited until dessert, then folded her hands on the table. We've been talking, she said, and though we did not include me. Daphne's studio needs $60,000 to open, and honey, your investment account is just sitting there. She said it the way you'd say the ladder is just sitting in the garage. She even knew the balance, near enough. I'd listed the account myself on an asset worksheet during our big family paperwork day back in 2021. One tidy line I've regretted every day since, and my mother had clearly kept compounding that number in her head. I set down my fork. I kept my voice level because level is the only speed I have. That account is my retirement, Mom, I said. It started with Nana's money. The answer is no, but I would love to help Daphne build an actual business plan. Silence you could, balance a spoon on. Daphne's chin trembled right on cue. My dad reached for potatoes he didn't want, and my mother smiled at me soft, disappointed, endlessly patient, a smile she'd been perfecting since my allowance days. Asha, family doesn't keep score. There it was again, that pretty little sentence. And for the first time in my life, I heard the fine print hiding inside it. I said no 2 more times before I left. I even hugged everyone goodbye. Driving home to German Village, I told myself it was settled. That no was a complete sentence, that grown women don't need permission slips for their own money. But at the door, my mother had squeezed my hand and said, "We'll figure something out." She wasn't asking anymore. I just didn't understand yet what she thought there was left to figure out. The weeks after that dinner were quiet, which should have been my first warning. My family does not do quiet after a no. Instead, my mother got suddenly, intensely curious about my health. She called on a Tuesday to ask if I was sleeping. She called the following week to ask if work was stressing me out, whether I still saw Dr. Hartwell over on Livingston, whether I was taking anything. In 3 decades, my mother has asked about my blood pressure maybe twice. This new bedside manner sat on me like a wet coat. Then Daphne texted, asking whether I still had the folder from our family paperwork day, copies of everyone's documents from back when we did all that estate planning after Nana's stroke. "Mom wants to update the file," she wrote. I told her I'd look. Then I sat very still because here's what I actually do for a living. I reconcile. I take 2 sets of records that are supposed to match, and I find the exact place where they don't. Sudden concern about my sleep from a woman who calls stress a rich person's hobby. Questions about my doctor. A request to round up documents. Individually, small change. Added together, a discrepancy. That night I pulled my personal file box down from the closet shelf, the good hanging folders, and went through it with a highlighter, like it belonged to a client under audit. Passport, deeds, insurance, and there in the estate planning folder, a copy of a document I'd signed back in 2021 and mostly forgotten about. The pages felt warm under my fingers, somehow, like they already knew something I didn't. I stood in my kitchen doing the one thing accountants do best. I opened an audit on my own family. The original of that document wasn't in my box. It was in my mother's house. I drove to Grove City that Saturday and found my dad in the garage, half buried under the hood of the 1987 Bronco he's been restoring since I was in high school. That truck is where he actually lives, if we're being honest about it. The house belongs to my mother the way a courtroom belongs to a judge. I brought him coffee and stood there while he fussed with a carburetor. "Dad," I said, "what is Mom planning?" He wiped his hands on the red rag, slow, buying himself time by the yard. "Planning dinner, probably. Meatloaf. Dad." He looked at me then with those pale, tired eyes of his that always seem to be apologizing for something they won't quite name. "Your mother handles the paperwork, Asha. Always has. You know that." That one sentence was the whole man. An excuse, a filing system, and a confession, all folded into 6 words, though I wouldn't understand the confession part for months. I asked if Daphne's studio was still happening. "Your mother thinks it'll be good for her," he said, and the "your mother" did a lot of quiet work in that sentence. We stood there in the smell of motor oil, and I almost told him about the phone calls, the questions about my doctor, the little hairs standing up on my arms. But you can't hand a fragile thing to a man whose hands are always full of engine. I hugged him and got back in my car. As I backed out of the driveway, he set the rag down and called after me, louder than he ever talks. "Whatever happens, Asha, your mother loves you girls the same." I drove home with that sentence rattling around in the back seat. People don't say whatever happens unless something is already scheduled to happen. The call came on a Tuesday night in April, while I was washing one plate and one fork, the dishware of a woman living exactly the life she can afford. I missed it. What I got instead was a voicemail 4 minutes long from my mother's number. She'd pocket-dialed me from her own kitchen. I stood at my counter and listened to pans clattering, water running, and then my mother's voice, casual as a grocery list, talking to my sister. "Once we're on the account, the studio deposit goes out first. Then we'll see about the rest." A cabinet door, Daphne's voice, smaller. What if she finds out? And my mother, with no more weight in her voice than a weather report. "By then it's done, Daph. She'll be angry. Then she'll get over it. She always does." I played it twice. The second time, I wasn't listening for the plan anymore. I was listening to that last line, "She always does." There it was, my entire job description in this family, printed on a 4-minute voicemail. Get angry, get over it, get billed. I want to be precise about what I felt because it wasn't rage. Rage is hot. This was the cold that comes off a ledger finally balancing after years of forced errors. The strange relief of a number that finally stops lying to you. My account. One still holding the bones of Nana's $5,000. I still didn't know how they thought they'd actually get onto it. That was the piece that wouldn't reconcile. The door I couldn't find. I saved the voicemail, not as a weapon. I already understood that no court on earth cares about kitchen noise. I saved it as an anchor, so that whatever anyone said to my face later, I would never again doubt my own arithmetic. My best friend from college is a woman named Marisol, and somewhere, along the way, she had the good sense to become an estate's attorney. Wednesday, lunch hour, a coffee shop near the courthouse. I slid my phone across the table and let her hear the voicemail through my earbuds. Marisol has a poker face you could land planes on, and I still watched her jaw tighten. "Okay," she said. "First, breathe. Second, this recording is a warning, not a case. There's no crime sitting on that tape. Intending to get onto an account isn't a crime, and the police are not going to care about your mother's kitchen. Then how would they even do it?" I asked. "It's an individual. Count, my name only. I've checked the titling twice." Marisol stirred her coffee, thinking, and then asked the question that rearranged my entire spring. "Asha, after your grandmother's stroke, when your family did that big paperwork day, what exactly did you sign?" The coffee shop got very loud and very far away. In 2021, when Nana June had her first stroke, the whole family sat down with an attorney and did the responsible thing. Wills, health directives, and a springing power of attorney, a document that stays asleep unless 2 things happen. I become incapacitated, and a doctor certifies that fact in writing. The moment it wakes up, my named agent can act on my money as if she were me. I'd picked my agent back when the word felt like a formality, and my mother still felt like my mother, Lorraine Mayers. Marisol looked at me over her cup. "Who keeps the original?" she asked, gentle, the way a nurse peels back a bandage. "My mother," I said. in the filing cabinet in her hallway. Neither of us said anything for a moment. If you've ever signed something because you trusted your family more than you trusted your own gut, tell me in the comments. I know I wasn't the only one. And subscribe, because what my mother did with that one piece of paper still makes my hands go cold today. I did everything right, and I need you to understand that, because what happened next happened anyway. Thursday morning, I took 2 hours of personal time and did exactly what Marisol told me to do. I signed a formal revocation of that 2021 power of attorney in front of a notary, with Marisol's paralegal standing witness. We mailed certified copies to the attorney who'd drafted it, and one to Whitfield Investments, the brokerage that had held my account since Nana first opened it. I executed a brand new power of attorney naming Marisol, someone whose loyalty I'd never once had to buy with obedience. I changed every password, set alerts on every login and every request, moved my financial mail to a locked box. Textbook. Airtight. Except Marisol called me that Friday with the part they don't put in the textbook. The revocation is valid the second you sign it, she said. But Whitfield is a machine. Documents go into a queue. A human has to scan it, index it, attach it to your file. That can take days, sometimes weeks. And if someone walks in first with the old power of attorney and a doctor's letter saying you're incapacitated, the firm has to sort out the conflict between the two documents. While they sort it out, they freeze everything. Months, maybe. And you would be the one who has to prove you're competent. I sat with that. Nana's seed money, frozen. My 12 years of $500 months, locked in a vault, while my own family argued in writing that I was too broken to speak for myself. I looked around my small, clean kitchen. The cat, the alphabetized spices, the life I'd built out of no inheritance except $11,000 and a clothespin grip on my shoulder. There was exactly one way to make my account not worth stealing. Empty it. People imagine that cashing out $145,000 feels like something out of a heist movie. It feels like homework. I spent that entire weekend at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet, because I don't do anything angry that I can do accurately. Which positions to sell, which tax lots to pick so the hit landed soft. What the capital gains would cost me come April, a real number, 5 figures worth of real. I stared at it for a long time before I typed accepted next to it in my notes. Call it the price of a fireproof life. Monday, I opened a new account at Clearline, a different brokerage clear across town, titled in my name alone. No history, no family folklore, maximum security settings, a fresh email address that existed for exactly one purpose. 2-factor everything, alerts on top of alerts. Tuesday night, with Ledger asleep on the chair beside me and my laptop glowing like a little altar, I pulled up the sell orders. All of it. Every faithful, boring index fund I'd fed since I was 21. My cursor sat over the confirm button, and I'm going to be honest with you about the one moment I actually wavered. It wasn't the taxes. It wasn't fear of my mother. It was the understanding that clicking that button meant admitting, in writing to myself, that my own family had become whether I needed shelter from, that the people who'd taught me to ride a bike were now a line item under risk. Nana June's voice came back to me then, her hand on my shoulder like a clothespin. Make sure you still have some left. I'm trying, Nana, I thought. This is me trying. I clicked. The screen blinked once, polite as a bank teller, and the unwinding of my family began with 2 words, order received. The next 6 days were the strangest of my life, because they were completely silent and completely loud at the same time. Trades take time to settle. The market sells your funds, and then the cash sits there catching its breath before it can move. So every morning I woke up, fed the cat, went to work, smiled at clients, and checked my balance the way a farmer checks the sky. The account stood at just over $145,000 the day the selling started. Then the transfers began, wired to Clearline in batches. 145 became 90. 90 became 40. Whitfield's fraud prevention desk actually called me on the second batch, a polite man reading from a script, verifying a large outgoing transfer. Did I authorize this activity? Yes, I said. This is Asha. Yes, I authorize it. You have no idea what those words felt like in my mouth. I authorize it after weeks of learning that somewhere across town, my own mother was quietly assembling the paperwork to argue that I wasn't competent to say them at all. 40 became 12. 12 became $400. And on the very last transfer, I did something no spreadsheet on earth would have suggested. I didn't zero the account out. I sat there with the cursor in the amount field, did one small piece of very private math, and typed a figure that left exactly $8.50 behind, down to the cent, a signature only 2 people alive would ever be able to read. Then I closed the laptop, made tea, and noticed my hands were steady. That frightened me a little. Why $8.50? Why not zero? Hold that question, because some debts never show up on a bank statement. I was the only one who'd ever kept those books. Marisol came over that Friday with takeout and a legal pad, because that's her version of a wellness check. Between bites of pad thai, she asked the obvious question. Why not confront them? Lay it all out, tell them you know, I'd thought about it plenty. Confront them with what? I said. A voicemail recorded through a kitchen wall. My mother will cry. Daphne will post something about toxic energy. Sunday dinner will taste exactly like it always tastes. I've been having that conversation for 30 years. I could write both sides of it from memory. She nodded slowly. So what's the plan? Revenge. I remember exactly what I told her, because saying it out loud was the first time I actually understood my own ledger. I'm not angry, I said. I'm done being the bank. That weekend, being done stopped being a feeling and turned into a checklist. I called the credit union about the car loan I'd co-signed for Daphne and started the paperwork to get my name off it through a refinance. I canceled the card that had been quietly feeding her gym membership for 14 months. I emailed my parents, kind and professional, letting them know a colleague of mine would be handling their taxes this year at the firm's standard rate. She's excellent, I wrote. You'll be in great hands. Small things. Hinges. Doors I had propped open with my own body since I was a teenager, clicking shut one at a time, quietly enough that the house of my family wouldn't notice the draft until winter. Marisol watched me work through the list and asked one more question, softer this time. The $8.50. Why that number? I just smiled and topped off her wine. That number was a receipt only 2 people in the world could actually read, and one of them had long since forgotten she'd ever written it. I was 14, the summer I learned the house rules, even though nobody ever posted them on the fridge. I babysat the Kowalski twins down the street that whole July, spit-up, tantrums, the occasional bitten lip, the works. And by the end of it, I'd earned enough for exactly one thing I wanted: a movie ticket and popcorn with my 2 best friends before school started. $8.50, saved in a bank envelope in my sock drawer, counted so many times the paper had gone soft. The Friday of the movie, the envelope was empty. Daphne was 9. She'd found it, taken every cent, and spent it at the corner store on accessories for a doll. She already had a shoebox full of tiny plastic shoes, a tiny plastic purse. I did what 14-year-olds do. I yelled. I cried. I demanded justice from the government of our house. My mother knelt down, gathered thief and victim into the same hug, and delivered the verdict that would end up running my life for the next 20 years. Sisters share, Asha. Family doesn't keep score. Nobody drove me to the movie. Nobody paid me back. My friends went without. Me and Daphne's doll got a purse. It's such a small story. That's exactly why I'm telling it. The big betrayals never arrive first. They're just small ones, compounding quietly like interest nobody ever audits. So 20 years later, when I emptied that account down to the last transfer, I left my family exactly what my family had once left me. They could have the $8.50. It was the only thing in that entire vault they'd ever actually been owed. And if my mother ever noticed that number and remembered, well, then she'd finally know the books had been open this whole time. May was the strangest month of all because I was the only person at that table who already knew the play had ended. My mother turned sweet, not regular sweet, negotiating sweet, the kind that shows up carrying casseroles. She invited me to lunch twice. She handed out compliments the way other people leave fingerprints. Suddenly, my hair looked healthy and my apartment sounded charming. Daphne posted a story with sage green graphics, big things coming. My cousins liked it. My aunt commented a row of sparkle emojis, and I sat in my kitchen, watching a countdown only I could see, feeling like the one engineer on site who already knows the bridge is closed. I went to my dad's birthday dinner in the middle of the month and played my part. I brought the cake. I laughed at his joke about turning 63 inside a 30-year-old truck. I did the dishes with my mother while she hummed. If you're wondering why I kept showing up, here's the truth. And it's the truth of every woman like me. I wasn't protecting the plan. I was saying goodbye, in installments to something they couldn't. See was already ending. Then over the dish soap, my mother asked, light as lint, whether I could send her a photocopy of my driver's license and my insurance card. For the family file, honey. In case of emergencies, the family file. I dried my hands slowly. "I'll take care of my own file, Mom," I said. "You've got enough to organize already." A flicker crossed her face, one beat of a frown, gone under the next smile like a fish sliding under ice. She patted my arm and changed the subject to Daphne's launch party. Driving home, I finally admitted what my body had known for weeks. Whatever the plan was, it had a deadline. I could feel it ticking. What happened during the first week of June, I didn't witness firsthand. I reconstructed it later the way you reconstruct anything, from documents, from timestamps, from the fraud file that would eventually carry my own name as the reporting party. A package arrived at Whitfield Investments, sent overnight, professionally assembled. Inside was the 2021 power of attorney bearing my real signature, notarized and legitimate. And behind it, stapled like a key hidden behind a door, sat a letter on medical letterhead, Hartwell Family Medicine, Livingston Avenue, my doctor's practice, or something wearing its face. The letter stated that the patient, Asha Rose Mayers, was suffering from a major depressive episode with cognitive impairment, that she presented as high-functioning, but was unable to manage her own financial affairs, that in the physician's judgment, activation of her durable power of attorney was medically appropriate. It carried a doctor's signature and a date in late May, the exact stretch of days my mother spent complimenting my hair and asking for my driver's license. Attached was a typed cover sheet requesting that Whitfield recognize Lorraine Mayers as acting agent and add Daphne Mayers as an authorized party on the account, effective immediately, so the family could manage the situation with discretion. Discretion. I've read that cover sheet more times than I want to admit, and that single word still puts frost on my spine. Here's the detail I keep coming back to, the one that tells you everything about how this was built. The letterhead was exactly right. The margins were exactly right. The clinical language ran as smooth as tap water. Whoever wrote that letter knew precisely what a doctor's stationery is supposed to look like. And my mother spent 19 years behind the front desk of a medical office, printing referral letters before she retired. I'm not saying anything more than that. I'm just showing you the ledger. The first ripple to reach me was an email, automated and gray as gravel. Whitfield Investments. Documents have been received regarding your account and are under review. No names, no details, just the machine clearing its throat. I called the 800 number on my lunch break and got a polite young man who could only tell me that a power of attorney package was in processing and that a specialist would reach out if anything required my attention. A POA package in processing. My revocation had gone in weeks earlier. Had it been indexed yet? Attached. Was it sitting in that same queue? 6 envelopes behind the knife aimed straight at it. I stood in the parking lot outside my office with the phone against my ear, feeling the very specific helplessness of watching 2 documents race each other through a bureaucracy, one of them wearing my name and the other wearing my mind. I called Marisol. She was in court. She called back 90 minutes later, which I spent alphabetizing nothing at all. Her advice was the best kind, unglamorous. Don't call them again. Don't explain yourself to anyone. From this second forward, everything in writing. If that package is what we think it is, the next call you get won't be from customer service. She was right, as usual. She just didn't guess how fast. Before we go on, if this story is landing anywhere close to your own life, do one thing for yourself this week. Pull out every document you've ever signed for family and read it like a stranger wrote it. Then subscribe and stay with me, because the phone call that came next is the exact reason this story has a fraud file number attached to it instead of just a family one. It was a Tuesday in June, mid-morning, payroll reconciliation open on my screen when my mother called. This is the moment you heard at the very start of this video, so let me give it to you whole. Her voice was bright as a parade, triumphant and tender at the same time, the voice of a woman delivering what she genuinely believed was good news. "Sweetheart, it's done. We added Daphne so she can access your 145. The deposit for the studio goes out Friday. I know you were scared, honey, but one day you'll thank me." I said it quietly, and something in my quiet made the parade stop. I looked at the cursor blinking in my payroll file, steady as a pulse, and I gave her the number the exact way I'd give it to any client. "Funny," I said. "I cashed it all out weeks ago. There's $8.50 left in that account." The silence on that line had furniture in it. I could hear her breathing change rooms. No, you can't. That's the family fund. That's the family's." "It never was, Mom," I said. "Ask Nana's paperwork." In the background, I heard my sister's voice climb like a kettle. "She's lying. "Check the app, Mom, check the app." And farther back from some doorway, my father's voice, low and useless. "Lorraine," a man patting a fire with a dish towel. My mother's voice came back shaking. And here is the part I need you to sit with, because I've sat with it for months. She did not say we're sorry. She did not say we were wrong. What she said was, "How could you do this to your sister? To your sister?" I ended the call the way I close a client file. I told her I loved them and I set the phone face down. My hand stayed steady until somewhere in the next hour they didn't. 48 hours later, my phone rang again. An unknown number, downtown exchange, a woman's voice level as a ruler. MS. Mayers. Karen Voss. Fraud Prevention, Whitfield Investments. Do you have a few minutes to discuss your account? Karen Voss talked the way flat country looks. No hills, no valleys, just procedure stretching out toward the horizon. I will be grateful for that woman's voice for the rest of my life. She walked me through it. When a power of attorney package claims a client is incapacitated, Whitfield doesn't simply flip a switch. Compliance verifies. A specialist had called Hartwell Family Medicine directly to confirm the letter, standard practice. Just a box to check, except the practice had no record of it whatsoever. The office manager pulled my chart while the specialist waited on hold. No such letter had ever been written. No such assessment had ever been made. The signature didn't match the doctor's own. The physician whose name was on it was, in Voss's careful phrase, extremely concerned. The package had already been moved to the fraud unit that same afternoon. Then she asked her questions, gentle the way scalpels are gentle. MS. Mayers, are you currently under any medical care that affects your ability to manage your own finances? No. Did you, at any time, authorize anyone to represent you as incapacitated? No. Do you recognize the parties who submitted this package? And there it was, the question with my whole family folded inside it. I looked out the window at the parking lot, at a woman wrestling a toddler into a minivan, ordinary life proceeding at full oblivious speed, and I said yes. The submitting party was my mother. The added party was my sister. Voss didn't gasp. Fraud units don't gasp. I suspect they've heard the word mother more often than anyone would hope. She let out one short, humorless breath, thanked me, and said the file would be escalated, that I'd receive documents. And then, right before hanging up, she said the sentence I hadn't known I'd been waiting years for a stranger to say. To be clear, there is nothing wrong with you. There is something wrong with this letter. She emailed me the scan an hour later. I want to tell you what it's like to read a document that erases you, written by people who taught you how to read in the first place. I opened the PDF standing at my kitchen counter, because sitting down felt like agreeing to something. There was my full name, Asha Rose Mayers, the Rose straight from Nana June, spelled out in clean, clinical type. Major depressive episode with cognitive impairment. The patient presents as high-functioning, unable to manage her financial affairs. Activation of the durable power of attorney is medically appropriate. I read it twice. The room went very still, and Ledger came and sat on my feet the way he does when the air in a room changes. High-functioning, even my sanity, graded on how useful it looked from the outside. Then the date snagged me and wouldn't let go. The letter was dated the 3rd week of May, my dad's birthday week. The week I brought the cake and dried the dishes while my mother hummed and asked about my sleep, my stress, my doctor, my driver's license. Every one of those questions lined up now like numbers in a column, and the column finally summed. She hadn't been worrying about me. She'd been drafting me, gathering specifics so the letter would sound like it came from someone who actually knew the patient. And God help me, she did know the patient. She'd known the patient for 34 years. That was the part I couldn't get past, standing there with my thumb hovering over the screen. This wasn't a stranger stealing an identity out of somebody's mailbox. My identity had been handed over from memory. The fonts were right. The margins were right. The tone was exactly right. 19 years at a medical front desk teaches a person precisely what paper has to look like before people will obey it. I closed the laptop, stood in my quiet kitchen, and said it out loud to nobody. You wrote me a diagnosis instead of an apology. You'd think a fraud file would have shocked my family into silence. Instead, they reached for the only tool still left in the drawer. The story. Within a week, my phone had become a switchboard. One aunt, voice gone syrupy with concern. Honey, your mom says you've been struggling. Are you even eating? A cousin I hadn't heard from since her wedding. No judgment, but is it true you drained your savings and cut everyone off? The family group chat, I was still in it, which tells you exactly how carefully this campaign had been aimed, filled with my mother's posts. An old photo of me at maybe 19, washed, out, unsmiling, caption please keep our girl in your prayers. A row of praying hands emoji under a caption about a hard season. Do you see the architecture of it? The exact same fiction they'd built to steal from me had become the alibi for having tried. I wasn't a woman whose mother forged a doctor's letter. I was a sick, unstable daughter who'd emptied her own accounts in a manic spiral and run from the people trying to save her. And hadn't Mom been saying for weeks how worried she was? The forgery had grown its own character witness. That's the part no fraud unit can ever prosecute. The way a lie about your mind gets laundered through casseroles and prayer requests until relatives you love start looking at you sideways at funerals for the rest of your life. I didn't respond in the group chat. I was later told my silence got discussed as further evidence of my condition. There is no move you can make against a game like that, which is exactly why I stopped playing it. I let my phone buzz itself to sleep on the counter. Then, on a Thursday evening, it buzzed differently. Text from my father, a man who signs his own birthday cards with whatever pen my mother happens to hand him. Call me. Just you. He picked the Home Depot parking lot on Stringtown Road, which is the single most Walt Mayers sentence I know how to write. Neutral territory, halfway between his house and mine, with the lumber carts for cover. He was leaning against the Bronco when I pulled in, and he looked old in a way that had happened suddenly, like frost overnight. He didn't do small talk, which is how I knew we'd arrived, somewhere new. The paper from the doctor, he said, eyes fixed on the cart corral. There's a line on the power of attorney form. Witness. That's my handwriting. I made myself breathe. Did you know, Dad, what the letter said about me? My father, 63 years old, wiped his hands on his jeans out of pure habit, no rag anywhere in sight, and said, "Your mother told me it was protection paperwork in case you ever burned out. You work so hard, honey, everybody knows that." She said the doctor was concerned, and it was better to have things in place. I signed where she pointed. I thought it was insurance. I believed him. That was the worst part. Then he asked for the thing he'd actually driven out there to ask. Not how are you? Not is it true what the letter says, because he already knew it wasn't. He'd watched me run his own numbers every April for free, sharp as a blade. He said, "Don't make this big, Asha. Whatever's happening with the money, your mother isn't sleeping. She isn't eating right. This could really hurt her." I looked at my father for a long moment, and I finally understood his exact position on the org chart of our family. He wasn't on my mother's side. He was on the side of quiet. He always had been, and quiet is a side. I hugged him because I'm still his daughter and drove home. Waiting in my mailbox was a thick envelope from Whitfield. Affirmation of non-authorization. Signature required. Before I tell you what I signed, I need to tell you what my Aunt Deb told me, because it's the piece that keeps this from being a story about a monster. And I promised myself I'd tell it straight. Deb is my mother's younger sister, a retired nurse who says true things at inconvenient moments, which is exactly why she isn't invited to everything. She called me one evening, not to lobby for anyone, just to talk. "I'm not taking sides," she said, "but you should know where your mother learned the math." In 1984, she told me, my mom was 19, working the front desk at a doctor's office and saving for the nursing program that had already accepted her. Their father was gone by then. Their mother cleaned houses and still came up short, every single month with 3 younger kids at the table. So every payday, my 19-year-old mother signed her check over, all of it. Nobody forced her, Deb said. Nobody had to. It was just understood. The strong one carries. And when she cried about the nursing program, your grandmother told her, "Lorraine, family doesn't keep score." I had to sit down on the arm of the couch. There it was, the sentence, 40 years older than me, handed down like a christening gown. Deb wasn't finished. Nobody ever paid her back, Asha. Not a dollar, not a thank you. That's the thing about that family. They don't ask. They assign. I understood something then that I honestly wish I didn't. My mother wasn't collecting money from me. She was collecting justice for a 19-year-old girl from 1984 that nobody had ever paid back, and I happened to be the only one at the table earning enough to cover a 40-year-old debt. Understanding is a strange gift. It explains everything and it excuses nothing. When we hung up, the Whitfield envelope was still sitting on my table, and it still needed a signature. Marisol came over the night I finally signed it, and she did the thing good lawyers and good friends both do. She made absolutely sure I couldn't pretend I didn't understand what I was signing. The affirmation was short. It stated, in effect, "I, Asha, am not incapacitated. I did not authorize this power of attorney activation. The medical letter submitted on my behalf was not written by my physician. Marisol laid it flat on my kitchen table and walked me through every paragraph. Once you sign, she said, Whitfield's obligations kick in automatically. They are a regulated firm sitting on evidence of a forged physician's letter. They have to refer it. That's not your choice or theirs, it's the rule book. And you should know the referral train already has more than one engine running. Dr. Hartwell's office filed their own complaint days ago. It's their name on the forgery, their license, their stationery. This moves forward with you or without you. I asked her the only question I had left. Then what does my signature actually change? She looked at me the way she used to write before final exams. Without you, it's a paperwork case. With you, it has a victim who says so out loud. Your name is what makes it real. And your mother will know exactly who made it real. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked back and forth across the grass, the most ordinary sound on earth. I thought about Sunday dinners and the good tablecloth. I thought about a 19-year-old girl handing over her paycheck in 1984 and a 14-year-old girl with a softly counted envelope in 2006, and how one of them had raised the other without either of them ever noticing the resemblance. Then I picked up my pen and signed my whole name. Asha Rose Mayers, the Rose straight, from Nana. We faxed it at 11:52 that night. 11 days later, a detective's card showed up in my mailbox. And before that same week was even out, my mother was standing in my hallway holding a Tupperware of soup like a white flag. But let me line that week up for you in order because it arrived all at once like weather rolling off the lake. Monday, the card in the mailbox. An economic crimes detective, Columbus Division of Police, a case number. A handwritten note asking me to call about providing a victim statement. We scheduled it for the following Thursday. I had 10 days, and somehow everyone in my family already seemed to know the clock was running, though nobody would say how they knew. Tuesday, my father called. A man who initiates phone calls the way other men write poetry, meaning almost never. No hello. If your mother ends up with a record, that's on you. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and answered him with the only thing that was still true. I'm not doing anything to her, Dad. I'm done being the bank, and I'm done being the alibi. Those are the only two jobs I'm quitting. He went quiet, said my name once, just Asha, the way you'd say it standing next to a car you couldn't fix, and hung up. Wednesday, Daphne texted a full paragraph, thumbs clearly blazing. You've always had everything. Mom did it for me because you never would. You get to be fine no matter what happens. Some people actually need help, but I guess family only matters when you're the one keeping score. I read it twice and set the phone down. In the whole flood of that week, the calls, the texts, the group chat prayer hands, I want you to notice the same thing I finally noticed. Not one person, not once, said the word sorry. They negotiated. They accused. They mourned the consequences out loud. The act itself had already been quietly voted out of existence. Then, Thursday evening, a week before my statement, my doorbell rang. My mother stood in my hallway in her church cardigan, holding chicken soup in a Tupperware with a burped lid. And for one dangerous second, she just looked like my mom. Can I come in, sweetheart? She had never once been inside my apartment in the 5 years I'd lived there. She walked in like a housing inspector, cataloging as she went. The curtains were thin, she noted. The building was old. Did the radiators bang? She found Ledger and called him a good boy in a voice I remembered from every scraped knee of my childhood, and Ledger, traitor to the cause, purred for her anyway. This is the ritual if you didn't grow up inside one. Before a big ask, my mother surveys everything you have, so that the asking lands on softened ground. I put the kettle on, because my hands needed a job. I still keep one cup just for her, cream-colored with blue cornflowers, bought at church sale years ago because it looked like something from her kitchen. 5 years it had waited in my cabinet for a visit that never came, and now here she was, and I hated how much the sight of that cup moved me. She talked about Nana June, about summers at Lake Erie, the cottage with the crooked step, the two of us in matching swimsuits. Remember, Asha, before everything got so hard. It was a beautiful memory, and it was aimed, and with my mother those were never two different things. Then she reached into her purse and set an envelope on my table, and my chest tightened before I even saw what was inside. Not an apology, a job application. Front desk, a dental practice off Broadway, filled out in Daphne's own looping handwriting, ready to send. She's going to work, my mother said. See, everything can go back to how it was. She smoothed the envelope flat like a bedsheet. I just need you to do one thing. The one thing, she laid it out, slowly with the tea steaming between us, and I'll give her this much, she'd clearly rehearsed. You'll talk to that detective on Thursday, And all you have to say is that you knew about the power of attorney, that you'd agreed the family would step in if you ever got overwhelmed. And the letter was just a misunderstanding, a mix-up with the doctor's office. You thought it was all arranged. One sentence, baby, and this whole thing goes away. They don't prosecute misunderstandings. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers, and her hand was warm and dry and smaller than I remembered, and her eyes filled right on schedule. Families protect each other, Asha. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. Christmas, Sunday dinners, your father, your sister, the whole table, all of it back, honey, all of it just the way it was. And then the closer, delivered soft as a hymn. Don't trade your whole family for a piece of paper. I want to freeze this frame for you, because standing in my own kitchen was the entire question I'd been living inside all year. Wearing my mother's cardigan. Does protecting your family mean protecting them from consequences? Every woman raised to be the strong one hits this exact crossroads eventually. Maybe not with an actual detective involved, but the shape is always the same. The lie is always small. The family is always large. The math is always presented as obvious. My mother watched me with the eyes of a woman who had never once, in 61 years, seen this particular trade refused, because she herself had never refused it either. She'd made it at 19 and called it love ever since. The kettle clicked. As it cooled, Ledger jumped down from the chair, and I finally asked her the only question I had left. Mom, are you sorry? She blinked, and I watched the question bounce off some inner surface and come back changed. Sweetheart, I hate what this is doing to not sorry, it's messy. Not sorry about the detective. Are you sorry you did it, the letter? My name, my mind. Mom, you put a disease in my chart that I don't have, and you were about to hand my sister my life's work. While I stood there certified as broken, the steam had stopped rising off her cup. My mother sat up straighter and reached for the oldest tool on her belt, the one that had never once failed her. Everything I have ever done, she said, voice trembling exactly right, I did for this family. Daphne needed a chance. Look at you, you always land upright, honey. You have since you were a baby. You didn't need it the way she does. Money just sitting in an account and my child drowning. What kind of mother would I be? Family doesn't, and I said it with her. Quiet, in unison, 34 years of practiced harmony. Keep score. The sentence hung between us in two voices. Then I said the rest alone. You're right, Mom. Family doesn't keep score. That's exactly why you never noticed I was the only one paying. Something crossed her face that I had never once seen there before, the flicker of a cashier realizing, one instant too late, that the drawer has already been counted. She tried tears. They were even real, I think. She tried volume. The names she called me arrived secondhand, already worn smooth by relatives in the group chat. Unstable, cold, calculated. She spat that last one like a pit, and I remember thinking, yes, Mom, someone here calculated and the arithmetic is all in evidence. I didn't raise my voice. It's the strangest thing I've learned all year. The closer I get to the center of my own life, the quieter it gets in there. Thursday, I'm going to sit with that detective, I said, and tell the truth. Not a word more, not a word less. I won't build the case, and I won't bury it either. For once, Mom, what happens next isn't going to be paid for by me. She stood so fast the chair barked against the tile. Then you are no daughter of mine. There are sentences you spend your entire childhood dreading, and when they finally arrive, they're almost a relief, the invoice at last in writing. I picked up her cup, cornflowers and all, and set it gently in the sink. Then I opened my front door and held it. Drive safe, Mom. She left the soup behind. The lock clicked shut, soft as a period at the end of a very long sentence. And somewhere inside that click was every Christmas I would never be invited to again. The Economic Crimes Unit works out of a building with all the charm of a filing cabinet, which, honestly, I found comforting. Thursday morning, 9 sharp, a conference room with carpet the color of more carpet. The detective was younger than I'd expected, and thorough in a way I genuinely respect. We went through the whole timeline the way I'd go through a client's shoebox of receipts. The dinner in March, the voicemail in April, I played it, and she noted it for exactly what it was. Context, not evidence, the revocation, the liquidation. She smiled very slightly at the 8:50, the only editorial comment she allowed herself the entire morning. The package at Whitfield. The letter. Then she slid the scan across the table one more time and asked if anything else stood out to me. I looked at my own name in that clinical font, and I told her the last true thing I had. The header has my name right, Asha Rose Mayers, but halfway down, one line calls the patient Asha Ray. My middle name is Rose. My mother's best friend from school growing up was named Rye. Mom always said she'd wanted to use it for one of us, and my dad overruled her. She's the only person alive who still makes that exact slip. The detective wrote for a while. I signed the statement, every page, initials in the corner, my whole name at the end, the rose right where it belonged. It's a strange feeling spending your own signature like that. My whole life, my signature had been a kind of service. Tax returns, cosigns, witness lines, permission. This was the first one that cost me something and belonged entirely to me. Walking out into the parking lot, the sun felt unreasonably, ordinarily bright. My phone buzzed. My father, you've made your choice, no question mark. He was right for once. I put the phone away and let him be. People sometimes ask if I regret it, so let me show you what the next 6 months actually looked like. You've earned the honest accounting. Nobody went to prison. I never wanted that. My mother was accepted into a pretrial diversion program. First offense, restitution of the administrative costs, a class, a set period of staying out of trouble, after which the charge gets dismissed entirely. The system, it turns out, extends first-timers a grace my own family never once extended me. She tells the relatives it was all a paperwork misunderstanding that Asha blew out of proportion, and most of them find it easier to believe her, because believing her costs nothing, while believing me costs Christmas. Dr. Hartwell's practice pressed their own complaint, changed their verification procedures, and now confirms every single letter with a callback. One small clinic, slightly harder to forge. Daphne took the front desk job at the dental office, the exact application our mother had filled out as a prop for my kitchen table, which is the closest thing this whole story has to a joke. She's apparently good at it. I always said she was capable. I just used to say it alone. My father is still in the garage with the Bronco. Some men rebuild the same engine for decades, so they never have to fix anything that talks back. Aunt Deb sends me pictures of her tomatoes and never once asks me to come home, which turns out to be its own kind of love. My money sits, a clear line under one name, mine, with Marisol holding a new power of attorney that only springs for licensed strangers, never for family. My will now leaves what I've built to a scholarship for first-generation accounting students. And in November, Whitfield finally closed out the old account and mailed me the balance, a check for $8.50. I didn't cash it. It's framed on the wall above my desk, right next to a photo of Nana June. On Tuesday nights, it hangs there behind me while I teach a free class at the library. Budgeting, beneficiaries, what a power of attorney really signs away to a room full of women. Every one of them, sooner or later, stays after to tell me about a signature they once gave to someone because they loved them. I used to believe that love meant being the one who always pays. Here's what I know now. In every family that insists it doesn't keep score, somebody is quietly keeping it on your behalf, whether you ask them to or not. So keep your own books. Sign nothing out of guilt. And remember that $8.50 of truth is worth more than $145,000 of keeping the peace. That's my story. One forged letter, one emptied account, and $8.50 that finally, actually got repaid. If this reminded you to go check your own paperwork, your power of attorney, your beneficiaries, the names sitting quietly on your accounts, take that feeling as your sign and do it this week. And if you know someone who's always the responsible one, send this to her. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.